Good afternoon. You're listening to Gambling with an Edge. Now here are your hosts, Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin.
Hey, everybody, and welcome. It's been quite a while since our last episode, but I am happy to be back, and I am here today with Elihu Feustel, and we are here to talk about his new book, Beyond the Odds, and whatever other topics we end up talking about. So, Elihu, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's always fun. You never know where you'll end up talking. So sometimes you get off the road, which is fascinating.
I know we are going to get a lot of questions about where is Bob, and to tell you the truth, I don't know where Bob is. I kept trying to get a hold of him to do this episode, but I never heard back. So, but I wanted to talk to you about the new book, Beyond the Odds, and I have a lot of questions because, as some of our listeners know, and maybe others do not, I got dragged out of retirement about a year ago by my longtime partner and convinced to get into sports betting. So I've been betting sports full time for the last year, and so the book, I thought, came at a great time for me, and so that's what we're going to talk about. You had said at the beginning that this is not really a book for beginners.
No, it's more built for people who already win and are probably members of an existing syndicate. If you're a beginner, Conquering Risk is a much better book to teach the basic analytics. This is more of a way, if you have the tools to win, how you can win more or price more markets or get more volume.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I want to start with, actually, Chapter 1 has a very interesting title, which is Exploiting Efficient Market Theory Without Handicapping. So Can we talk about that? Can we talk about efficient market theory, and then how can we beat that without handicapping?
Yes. Go ahead, ask.
Okay. Why don't we start with what is efficient market theory?
All right. Efficient market theory is the idea that closing lines are generally pretty accurate. So, for example, if an NFL line closes at 7, you have a 7-point favorite, then pretty close to half the time that team is going to cover 7 points. Excluding pushes, half the time the dog will cover, half the time the favorite will cover. And even if it hasn't done that in the past, going forward it will. And that's a very critical concept. Because 20 years ago, you could get value betting all the dogs. If you bet every big dog in the NFL more than 20 years ago, I think they used to hit at a 55% rate. But As time has evolved, the markets have become more efficient. And strategies that used to work in the past no longer will. Monday night, bet the dog and under. Doesn't work anymore. The Super Bowl, they used to be able to middle the Super Bowl pretty consistently, where you bet the dog on the spread and the favorite on the money line and play for the middle. But all these things, as more and more smart money comes, the closing lines and the markets become more efficient. And the way Answer Key works, it relies on this. So just like with Black-Scholes relying on the prices of the commodity being correct to price your derivatives, Answer Key assumes that the price of the parent line, the game spread and the game total, are correct, 50-50 markets, and then you use that with the past results to price derivatives.
Okay. So this is true for the NFL, and I would assume for Major League Baseball is another one that I would think is pretty efficient. But what about other sports?
So the idea generally works in all sports. College basketball, college football, NFL, NBA, but it is best when there are not team-specific tendencies. So, for example, in baseball, if you try to use Answer Key to price a first inning prop, for example, will there be a run scored in the first inning? That is a horrible matchup, a horrible use of Answer Key, because that is not a good. The money line for the game and the total for the game are not very predictive of if there'll be a run in the first inning. You need to price that. You need to say, well, how good is their starting pitcher? how good, are the first three batters on each side, are they home run hitters or is it a small ball lineup? So in some cases, it's bad. Another case where it doesn't work terribly well is in NBA, because the NBA, the teams will run different lineups. Actually, I knew this was a problem. Abnormally Distributed pointed this out, why it didn't work in NBA. And that's, a 7-point favorite has a different lineup that may run at different times of the game. So not all 7-point favorites are the same. Whereas in football, especially in NFL, you can pretty much say all 7-point favorites on a total of 45 are pretty similar. Their distribution of scoring is going to be very similar. Not perfect, but good enough to beat the markets.
So kind of the first thing that people find when they're getting into sports betting is top-down betting, which is also trying to exploit this idea of the efficient market by grabbing lines that haven't moved yet at some books, right? But what you're talking about really is more thinking a level deeper about what is some other thing that is affected by this that maybe the book is not pricing correctly.
Yeah, so most sports books use charts that are outdated. Like they had some person who just looked at it and made a guess. For example, when you look at NFL money lines, there's a chart that says 7-point favorite. Here's the 2 money lines. And the charts don't even look at totals. And anyone who's looked at NFL money lines with fairly closely will see that if you have a 7-point favorite, that's going to be a bigger favorite on the money line with a low total than a high total. Same thing in NBA. A 10-point difference on an NBA total makes a very substantial difference on the money line. So you may find spots, and in fact, I think I have a couple bets tonight where I'm going to end up betting the dog on the money line if I can get a good price.
So we are recording this on Monday,
yes,
the 23rd. So are we talking about the NFL game tonight?
Yeah, there are actually 2 Monday night games tonight. And I just now, anytime I announce something I'm betting, it almost always loses. So I'll have to make sure no one is able to bet this until after it's played. But let's see.
Yeah, I won't release this until you've already lost.
Yes. So I see that if you can get Jacksonville at plus 223, I think that's cheap because the fair price should be about 201. And same thing with Washington. Getting Washington at 300 when it should be about 270. So it's surprising that even on NFL money lines are not very efficient. So the spreads and totals are extremely efficient. And the best way to look at the efficiency is to look at how much can you bet in one click. And if it's a big number, it's going to be efficient. And I'm just going to log into Bookmaker and see what their limits are for NFL, just for a comparison of money lines to spreads and totals.
Yeah.
So we go to NFL right now. If I want to bet the spread, I can bet Jacksonville plus 5.5, risking 111,000. If I want to bet the total, I can bet 22,000. If I want to bet the money line, I can still risk 20,000. So that's so the money lines are about as efficient as totals. But the money line as a derivative using the spread and the total, I think is beatable in pretty much all sports for the main game money lines.
And I would assume that NFL is better at it than other sports, but
yes,
it's still not as good as it should be.
I agree. NFL derivatives are generally a lot better priced than college football derivatives. For example, if I'm going to bet the NFL stuff, I want to either bet it early in the day or bet it the day before. Whereas college football, you can probably beat it 30 minutes to post.
Sometimes I see, people there. It seems like a lot of people are originating college football, especially totals. And it's really hard to know what's going on when they often do not agree with each other.
And there's so much rampant manipulation as well. So you have groups that want to bet a number and they'll push it, 0.2 points so that they can play the paperheads that are following the market makers. So they like over 44. So they bet it down to 43 and then bet over 43, which they like even more. So they pay a few thousand in juice to move Bookmaker and Pinnacle and Circa, and they come smashing back for 10 times as much, 10 times as much equity. So if they paid 1,000 in juice, they may want to bet 100,000 at the paper heads on it.
Wow.
And then so they paid a 1% tax to get a half point or a full point. So in terms of an investment on the return, it makes perfect sense to do it.
Of course it does. But so here's one thing I don't understand. So you will see that Pinnacle and Bookmaker have moved down to 43, but all of the rec books here in the US, FanDuel, DraftKings, all of those guys are still at 44.
Because they're not taking sharp bets, and the sharp markets don't really apply to them. So this is another problem with the legalized industry. When they collar, and this creates all kinds of headaches for them as well. When you kick out anyone with the pulse, how can you tell what the right number is? You can copy the offshores, but the offshores might be getting manipulated. So they don't
seem to be copying the offshores.
Yeah, so they have to choose: do we copy blindly, or do we wait for bets to come in? And if you don't have a known group of smart players to watch, you don't know what the right side is. So these books like, Pinnacle and Bookmaker and even Circa, they take a bet and they know how smart their players are. And when you have hundreds of smart people telling you what the right answer is, it's pretty easy to get to the right answer quickly, or to choose to be off of it if you want. There's situations when you may not want to deal the best number. But the DraftKings especially, I'm going to use DraftKings as an example because they're easy to beat up on. If they lower your limit, everyone's limits to $38, who can beat them? Then all they're left with are people who they haven't profiled, that they haven't recognized as winners, plus the squares. So they throw a number up, they don't know if it's good. They don't care if it's good because the losing players are going to lose no matter what number you put up. And anyone who wins, they'll toss. But the risk to that is when you have people coming in that are unassessed, and they can come in and actually abuse your bad lines.
Well, and not only that, the sharp players can move your lines in the wrong direction for $38.
Well, generally, I don't think they're going to move off of any $38 bets. If I were running DraftKings and I saw 100 guys with $38 limits for betting me, I'd say I better cut their limits down to $2.
Don't give them ideas.
Yeah.
So you brought up the word collared. So can you explain what you mean by collared?
So normally a market-making book has house limits that everyone can bet. So I just read you earlier the house limits for tonight's Monday Night Football games at Bookmaker. Everyone can bet, going back to the spread, any person can bet to win $100,000 on tonight's NFL games. If you are Billy Walters, if you are a great winner, if you're Floyd Mayweather, whoever you are, you're going to have at least those house limits of $100,000. And if you're up $1 million against them, you're still going to have limits of $100,000. And because these limits are big, every smart person knows that they can bet here. And they can bet probably as much as they want to eat here. When a book collars you, they are creating an inefficiency in the market by lowering how much you can bet. So DraftKings might take $100,000 from known losers, but if you have a proclivity to win, they may lower I use $38 because that's my limit on the Super Bowl last year. So any normal people, $100,000. The smart people can bet $38. So in fact, you see a lot on Twitter. One of the ways you can recognize losing players is they post big bets at DraftKings.
And you also talk about these auto movers.
Yes.
So this is a bot, right? That moves the line.
An algorithm run by a market-making sports book, and its purpose is to prevent them from taking two bets at the same price from a smart person. So if you wanted to bet Jacksonville plus 5.5 minus 111, and let's say you wanted to get $500,000 down, if you bet that first 100,000 and your account is profiled, it's going to move that number. It's going to automatically change. And on a super liquid market, it might move 4 cents. Maybe it would move from minus 111 to minus 115. That would be consistent with the 20% auto move. And what that does is if I want to bet more, I have to pay a higher price. I can't just repeat bet and quickly get in $500,000 at once. And pretty much, at least all the offshore market makers use this. And Circa, since they don't take, automatic, I don't think they let you rebet without at least adjusting the line. So they have to do theirs manually without an auto move, but it's still the same idea that if a smart player is firing into you, you don't want to give them the same price twice. They have to pay a penalty for every successive bet.
So how can the sharp player move the bookmaker and Pinnacle line? If they're taking 100,000 on the game, how can they move it for only, a few $1,000s?
And they can't move it on game day. It has to be before game day. So the earlier it is in the week, the lower the limits are. The spread limits might be 5,000 on Sunday night, and the total might just be a couple thousand. So it's much cheaper to move it on a Sunday night or even a Monday than it is on game day. And the college football limits are much lower than NFL. Let's see. If we're dealing Monday, I'm just going to see what they have right now. So looking at the Army Temple game, 3 days away, they're taking 3,000 on the side, 1,000 on the total, and up to a base unit of 1,000 on the money line. So if you're paying basically 5% of that is a tax. If you put in a $3,000 bet, you're paying $150 in juice to get one auto move. So let's say you do that twice at Bookmaker, twice at Pinnacle, twice at Bet Online. You're paying $1,000 in juice, and if you have a sharp account, you might move the price 3-4%.
I was at Bet Bash. You were at Bet Bash, and
yeah.
I don't know if you attended. Well, maybe I shouldn't talk about that.
I think you could talk. I think anything Bet Bash is fair game here. I don't think Spanky would mind.
Okay, well, it was Spanky who basically said, the way he sounded like a ninja, like that he likes to bet, an hour before game and not move the market.
Well, yes, and that's correct. So there's two styles. If you bet into a market maker, if you're betting a lot into these books, you will move the line. If you bet into the paperheads are following the market makers. That doesn't tend to move the line nearly as much. And if you have 100 accounts at these paperheads, and each of them takes $500, then you can get, you get 50,000 without doing anything to the market.
I see.
Or much. Yeah. I mean, some of these books will move, and some of them might actually lay a little bit off. But in general, most of them don't.
But the other thing that always perplexed me was when the Pinnacle and Bookmaker are below the market of everybody else, there are other sharp people who know that. Yeah. Why aren't they going and betting that when they know that must be good?
Well, are you saying, so maybe I don't understand your example. Let's say the market makers are at 3 and the U.S. legals are at 4. What do you contend a sharp player should do in that situation?
Well, let's make it better than that. Let's say that the recreational books are at 3.5 and Pinnacle and Bookmaker are at 2.5.
Okay.
Now,
so in NFL, that's an 8% difference. 50.
Okay,
if one is correct, yeah.
The top down people are going to say, "Oh, I should take this 3.5 because Pinnacle and Bookmaker are sharp." Yeah. But I would think the sharp guys would know that's actually the good side is to bet the 2.5.
So in that case, if the market makers were at 2.5,
yeah.
If you believe those are the market makers, that's my source of truth. And I would say the true number, the 50-50 number, is 2.5. And if you bet either side of 2.5 laying juice, you have a bad bet. So
okay, but so what I'm saying is, the sharp guys will look at that and say the line is really 3, and that's been manipulated down to 2.5 because sharp guys are busy betting it at paperheads.
Okay, maybe that's you have to be much more situational, I think, to predict. It's very difficult to predict when manipulation is happening. When you see a move early, it might be a sharp bet or it might be a manipulation. And another one of the games that happens, especially with totals, you have competing groups that are trying to figure out. You have 3 different groups, and they all have their opinion on what the total is. Generally, they mostly agree. So if Group A starts manipulating down, it's at 140, they're going to push it down to 139 because they think the real number is 143. They bet it down to 140, 139. Another group sees it. Because they think it's 144, they know it's a manipulation, and they can come in and front run the other group and feed off of their manipulation before the original group gets it in.
Right. That's exactly what I'm getting at. Yeah.
If you have if you're going to front run manipulation, you have to have your own opinion. You can't just rely on the market because you don't know if that move is a legit move or if it's a manipulation move.
Got it.
Now, I don't have opinions. I have no opinions, so I can't spot manipulate. I can't tell if it's manipulation until the end of the day.
Well, wait, you must have opinions because you're betting. So
I have no opinions. I have no handicapping. It's just efficient market theory. So I do zero handicapping.
Well, I would call obtaining the right price of a derivative a better price than the books. I would call that handicapping.
Okay, that's just a math problem. I view handicapping as dissecting personal team information and stats to try to come up with an opinion that's other than 50-50 on something.
Gotcha. Okay, so that sort of brings us to one very good place to look for these things is correlated parlays.
Yeah,
and the casinos both love correlated parlays and hate them. I think they love the dumb players who bet same game parlays where they're paying a ton of juice, but hate it when sharp players sort of figure out a same game parlay that is correlated that they didn't realize was correlated.
Yeah, and there's actually 2 different ways to exploit same game parlays. One is you find a pair of bets where there's simply no correlation. There's no correlation priced into it. And an example of that would be when a book lets you bet the favorite and the over. The closer those 2 numbers are to each other, the greater the correlation will be. If you're betting minus 40 and over 44, the correlation is almost 100%. If you're betting minus 3 and over 42, maybe there's a 5% correlation. There's still a small correlation, but not enough to overcome the juice. So a book has to guess, where do I want to take it? I want to take it more than 3 and 42. Yeah, I want him to parlay that. 40 and 44, I don't. Somewhere in the middle, because every time they reject a bet, they're losing money. So should they take 6 and 44? Yeah. Should they take 10 and 44? Yeah. Should they take 15 and 44? And it's just a math problem. Which is, how strong is the correlation? So the strongest way a book can do it is to actually just use figure out what the correlation is and price the 4 parlays correctly. But in most cases, sports books don't have the math teams in place to do this correctly for every possible wager.
Why not? Why?
So to get it's not enough to get a data scientist. You have to get number crunchers that also have expertise in a sport and also have expertise in betting. If you try to use data scientists in this industry that are missing a component, you can have some disasters. You can come up with something worse than old school bookmaking. And you remember, I think Cantor Gaming, they got a bunch of Wall Street. I believe it was Cantor who had a bunch of Wall Street quants come in and try to price in game, and they built their own model, and I think they call it Midas or something very pompous, and they just got utterly buried. And it's not the first time I've seen quants just get destroyed. So it's if you don't have all 3, and they don't come cheaply. To get good mathematicians in sports betting, you need, like I said, a variety of skills, and they're not very common. So
yeah, and they could just go out and bet themselves, and and maybe make more money than the book could afford to pay them.
Yeah, yes. So you have a situation where either they don't try to price a correlation, and we're just going to assume it's zero, no correlation for everything, and we're just going to cut it off at a certain point. Or you see, I'm going to call what's called bad correlation math. If you look at DraftKings same game parlays, they overcharge. They assume when you're betting things that are positively correlated and they're going to pay you less, they drastically cut the payout, whereas they don't increase the payout enough for negatively correlated events. So they just, it's safe to do it that way, but it's not very consumer friendly. And then you have some teams that do actually a pretty good job of pricing their same game products. So, I would say FanDuel does probably a better than average job on their same game parlays of actually paying what the true probabilities are. But again, it takes a lot of money and commitment to trying to do that.
Well, that's very encouraging to hear that so many of them are so bad at it.
Yes.
Okay, but so now I want to talk about something that is the bane of everyone's existence, I think, and that is adverse selection. So
Yes.
Can we start with what is adverse selection?
Adverse selection is you're looking for good plays, and things that stand out are often from just noise as they are a successful strategy. So if I look in the past and I say, I think I have an approach that in the past has done well, and then you carry that forward to the future, suddenly it doesn't work as well because you're confusing noise with predictability. So if you aren't very careful in your methodologies, you're going to find things that may have won in the past that have no prayer of winning going forward and then lose horribly. I don't know if that's what you're getting at.
Well, it's that, but I'm also in there somewhere is also this term market resistance.
Okay. All right. Market resistance. Yes. The more you can bet, the more likely you are to be wrong.
Right. So what do you do?
Well, you pay attention. One way to assess if you think you're going to win going forward is to look at your closing line value. If you're making a good play, more often than not, the market will move your way. If I think -3 is 110 is a good play, if it really is a good play and this set of plays is good for the long term, it's very likely to close at -3, -115, or -3, -120. But if I'm, in real time as I'm betting this stuff and tracking it week to week, I see that these plays at -3 or 110 are closing pretty close to the same price I bet them. Then even if I were winning, that's a pretty good warning sign that I'm not going to win going forward.
What about when you have a market that's really efficient, like the NFL or MLB, great. What about a market that maybe is not as efficient, like MMA or something like that? Here's an example. Let's say that you have 5 MMA bets, and you don't want to bet them in the beginning of the week, right? And now it's, Friday and you're ready to bet and you look and like 4 out of the 5, the line has moved the way you thought it should. And one of them has gone, instead of -110, it's now +125.
The market gave you the middle finger. Yes.
So do you still bet it, or do you say my model's better than their model? Because that's not a really efficient market.
That's a very tough question. And that, I guess, that depends on how your model works and how confident you are in it. Now, some people, some of the MMA modelers they know more than the market. They know how the training camps are going. They know about their injuries. They know about tendencies. They have fight stats. And these people can probably, again, ignore the market. But MMA is a weird market in that it doesn't appear as efficient as a lot of the other stuff.
Right.
There are people who can win in MMA who don't care about the market. They don't care about the price. They just know the right side, and they know that some of these markets are horribly mispriced.
Yeah.
So MMA is it's weird compared to the stuff I do. I wouldn't try using answer key on MMA.
Actually, so we've heard this term a lot already. Answer key. What is answer key?
Answer key is an algorithm to generate a sample based on a parent price that you can then ask questions from this. You can answer questions by looking at that sample. For example, tonight's NFL game, if I'm going to use answer key on, let's see. So right now, Cincinnati is playing Washington tonight. Cincinnati is a 7-point favorite, minus 124, take back 104, and the total is 46. So I could generate a sample of, 400 or 500 games that best describe that matchup. And in that sample, I would have minus 7 covering about 54% and plus 7 covering about 46%. Again, just because of the implied win rates of the money lines. And in that sample, I would want half the games to go over 46, half to go under. And I would want the mean spreads to be, and the mean total to be similar of the sample. So you generate a sample, and then you can ask questions about the game. So if in that game, what are the odds of a team scoring 3 times in a row? And I could look at my data set and count and get a pretty good guess. What is the fair first half line? What is the fair first half total? What's the average team total? So you can use your sample to price just about any derivative. And as long as the game is good for lining up with answer key, it works very well. It works especially well in football because you have non-normal distributions. It works less well in college basketball, but football is really its strongest area.
Okay, so let's talking about maintaining your accounts. I mean, this is, I think, one of the best chapters in the book, and applies to anybody who knows nothing about math, even, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is what everyone cares about: is how do I not get collared?
And this is such a problem for me that I mostly use movers now. So I don't use many of my own accounts. I can bet into any market maker, which I generally don't want to do. And then I have other people who I just say, when you're working with a mover, you say, here's what I want, here's how much I want. And they just try to get it for you. And if they fill it, you get the whole amount, or you may get less. Usually they're going to use prices that are available at Buckeye or Metallic. And it's a different world from the solo operator. Like, how many people are you working with or you have a group, or are you mostly solo?
I have a group. Yeah.
Okay.
And
well, it's most individuals are betting into the DraftKings, they're betting into Caesars, and they may be betting into Bovada and some of the offshores. But most of those recreational books, you only get one bite of the apple. So when you're at a different level, you're not worried about the rec books. You're not trying to beat these soft books. You're actually trying to hit big, somewhat bigger markets. But as I discussed in the book, the best way to keep accounts is to lose money.
Well, yes.
So if you lose money and get no closing line value, every book in the world is going to love you. So how do you generate a plus EV strategy that has the best of it long term, but can look horrible short term? And that's one of the ways to do that is high variance strategies. So you're going to lose early, or you're going to blow it up. And if you blow it up, okay. Or you may lose early, you blow it up, and then blow it up again. So
right.
Parlays are a good way, whether they're correlated or round robins of other plays. The books are getting resistant to the round robins. A couple of years ago when I first started it, I think they were laughing at me. And they were just giving me higher limits because I was doing it. You can still do it to a degree, but it's not quite the open season it was.
Yeah. So did I hear you right? You're not trying to bet into the recreational books like DraftKings and FanDuel and
right. I'm not.
Just because you can't bet enough, or?
Well, one, I'm basically collared everywhere. In my account's my own name. I don't.
Right, but you have people moving for you.
I don't. Well, I personally don't beard. I don't multi-account. The movers, it's so much easier to bet into Buckeye skins and Metallic skins than it is the legals. It's kind of an interesting problem that the legals are causing for themselves. They're helping the college bookies by banning everyone.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Anything that you think we haven't covered that I should be asking that I'm forgetting about?
Well, it's your show.
I guess, you do talk about abusing the bonuses. So I guess we should cover that a little bit with these, bonuses, right? You want to bet them on long shots, but aren't the casinos sort of smart enough to know that people who bet them on long shots?
I don't know if they're smart enough to know that. What you have seen is the behavior of the legal sports books has been changing. So they're offering smaller and small. They're trying to offer bonuses that are less lucrative to professional players. So if you're a professional player, the bigger the bonus, the better. And I remember Bet Rivers and Caesars both had $5,000 risk-free bets. So if you give me a risk-free bet for $5,000, that's worth just as much as $2,600 in cash for me, pretty easily. What you're seeing now is much smaller amounts, $200, or bet $5 and get $200 in free bets.
Yeah.
So they're looking at it from a cost per acquisition. If I can get a person by giving him $200 in free stuff, I spent some money for advertising, I spent $200 to bring him in the door. And that's much, and you're less likely to get a professional player doing it that way than you are with the $5,000. So if you give the $5,000 bonus, you pay $2,600 to acquire a vampire who's going to suck your blood out.
If you want to squeeze out some extra EV and you bet on a longer shot, do the casinos recognize that? Do they?
So the most, I don't know how closely the U.S. books look at bonuses, but the offshores, they look for something there's two behaviors you see from professional players with bonusing. One is you see them playing the long shot. Two is you see them going all in. So say they with the offshores, generally you don't have a risk-free bet. You have what's called a free play. You don't have to lose that first bet to get the free bet.
Right.
So if you say you send $1,000 and you have a $1,000 deposit plus $1,000 free play. What you'll often see the professional players do is they will bet both on the same play. So that if they lose their first bet on a long shot, they lose their deposit, they lose their free play, and now they have no rollover to meet. And by finding a way to evade the rollover, that's how you break the bonuses. And books are catching on to this. This is why you're again seeing a lot of the bonusing, a lot of weirdness in the way they're handling bonuses. Bovada has a rule that I think you can't bet more than 10% of your bonus amount on any play. And if you do, I think they're confiscating balances. And
wow.
I think BetUS has a rule that no more than 10% of your deposit can count towards any rollover.
Well, so BetUS also has a rule that you can't bet anything higher than plus 140.
Yeah, and I think BetOnline has a rule that's similar. So the idea of capping where you can bet a free play is to minimize how much equity. Your average players, your normal players are going to bet minus 120, plus 120 in that range. They're not looking to, it's a gamble. Whereas the math nerds, we're coming after with all our calculators.
Yeah. What is breakthrough theory?
Breakthrough theory is a way to bet more. The idea is if you have an edge, how do I get as much down on it as possible? And if you're better at pricing something, you want to come at it from every possible way you can. That means you may want to price multiple markets. You may want to include parlays. You may want to include teasers, parlay cards, even. Any way you can come at it to get more than just you can on a straight bet. And this, round robins are, most of the books still take 18 round robins. If you go to BetUS, they'll take an 18 round robin. So they recently cut my limits to 25 grocery dollars on parlays. But if I put in an 18 round robin by threes, that's 56 different bets. So, now you start you get some volume down, and every dollar bet, if you bet it by threes, is actually put into play 3 times. So if you risk $1,000 on a round robin by threes, you have the equivalent action of 3,000 at risk. So if I had 8 teams, with a round robin of $1,000, that 3,000 divided by 8, I have $400 at risk, effective risk on each team, even though my limits were 25 grocery dollars. So you can do some, and if they don't limit you, or if they take higher ones, you can do a lot more. I think Canby books take them by 10s, DraftKings takes by 20s, Caesars takes by 25s. So if you get an account that isn't limited, a 25 team round robin by 3s, I think is 2,300 legs. So $42 a leg gets you a $100,000 swing.
Wow. But I have to say this about round robins: the record keeping is an incredible pain in the ass. And actually, for me, just the record keeping in general seems to be one of the most challenging parts of this business.
So there are two parts of the record keeping. There is making sure you don't overbet. That is, how much effective risk do I have on this? And then there's how much money did I make at the end? And of the two, making sure you don't overbet, I think, is much more important. So when my group and we're betting something, the way we notate a round robin is you select the plays, you say how much is at risk on the whole round robin. So say if I have a $100,000 round robin on 20 teams by 3s, that would be 300,000 at risk divided by 20. I would treat that as a $15,000 straight wager on each of those teams. So,
okay.
And then if I wanted more than 15, I would add it in, but that would be my starting point. And usually if you're betting, you want to you do your round robins first. And so then you fill up the remainder. Now it can get really convoluted if you bet a round robin and you either win a couple legs early or lose a couple legs early. So for example, if you have a 20 team round robin and you lose 4 selections on Thursday and Friday, now you have your effective risk went from 15,000 a team to maybe 10. So you may have to say, oh, look, I'm short. I need to put in another round robin with some more stuff to get back to where I want to be. But there's, go ahead.
What? No, I'm just, it's just the record keeping. But a point you made in the book is that a lot of people are overbetting and maybe not realizing that they're overbetting.
No faster path to hell.
How can they? So is it because they're overestimating their edge, or
it's not two things? One is they do overestimate their edge, and two is sometimes they just don't even think about it. They don't sit back and say, take a minute. What is the optimal amount for me to bet here, given the risk I want? So if you have time to breathe, you say, what Kelly fraction am I comfortable using? So, and this becomes a nothing question later. If you keep winning and your money grows, Kelly becomes irrelevant in most cases. Yep. But it's very important early. And what having a fractional Kelly does is it protects you from yourself and from your mistakes. If you overestimate your edge, or say you mess up, have you ever double bet a game, bet twice as much as you intended to?
Haven't done that, but I've done other things where I realized after the fact, oh, I think I bet too much on that.
Have you bet something that had a correlation that you didn't think about? For example, if you bet a first half over and a first quarter over, then there might be a 50% correlation. And if you treated those as independent bets, you probably overbet.
Well, the other thing that happens to me is I bet it and my partners bet it. And then we go back and compare notes and realize, oh, we got more on this than we intended. And then we go, is it adverse selection? Well, not only did we overbet, but maybe it's a bad bet.
So one thing, if you have multiple people betting, I would strongly recommend you use Google Drive. Google Drive. So we have a Google Drive. We have every game, and generally we have a captain. So there's a person who's the captain on a weekend, and they get to call all the shots. So no one bets unless the captain signs off or delegates a certain part of the card to them.
Yeah. Well, what we learned from this is you have to attach an amount of risk for that one person because if you're sending it to 3 different people, you can't give them all like the top end because they could all 3 fill it. And So you have to kind of make some decisions about, I think this guy can get this much down maybe, and this guy can maybe get that much. But yeah, it's a juggling act. This used to happen in blackjack too, when you have a blackjack team and people are sometimes in different countries. and then they report back and 3 guys all lost on the same night. And suddenly,
your session bankroll is too small in that country.
Yeah.
So normally when I put in an order, I'll say I'll cap the amount this much up to this. And if you know how much each guy can get, you can arrange it. And if you're not betting weird stuff, are you mainly betting size and totals?
We're betting weird stuff. I mean, but we're also betting sides and totals.
Well, betting the weird stuff. I mean, I joke about betting team totals, like FCS team totals. But man, you get these weird markets. It's so much easier to win, despite me losing every bet I've ever posted.
So yeah, we just have to look at your posts and bet the opposite then.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
All right. Well, great. This has been great, really informative for me. I don't know about everybody else, but I appreciate it a lot. So yeah, any final thoughts? Anything that you want to leave our audience with?
Oh, I'm thinking about Baccarat right now. So
Baccarat. Oh, well, wait a minute. What are you thinking about Baccarat?
I'm just wondering how much more tolerant the casinos are relative to blackjack on the side bets.
Well, the problem with the side bets is it's kind of really obvious what you're doing. And
same thing with counting, and they still let you do it.
Well, yeah, that's true. That is true. But I have a good friend who was playing a side bet on Baccarat, and his BP was a particular Asian ethnicity.
Mm-hmm.
And when he would come over to bet, he was playing 2 tables at once. And when he would come over, he would talk to this girl on the table that was also of the same ethnicity.
Yeah.
And when they barred him, they barred the girl. And she was just a degen, that happened to be, and they put them together because they were from the same country. Whereas the guy actually counting the side bet was a white guy that was far.
Wow.
But I will say this, my experience is that anytime you move to a game other than blackjack, and even if you're on blackjack, if you're not counting cards, you get way more leeway than, And the other thing I would say is, as you move away from Las Vegas, the further away you get, the casino IQ goes down considerably.
Yeah. Yes.
So, but yeah, Baccarat, it's out there.
I was kind of shocked at the bankroll requirements to play Blazing Sevens.
Oh yeah. And it's such a boring game to play.
Yeah,
I mean,
so you're going to win one hand, like one side bet every 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
But I think one of my scouts reported Hard Rock has a $500 limit on it. So that's like a $1,000 an hour game if you can get heads up. Until they kneecap you.
Yeah. You're better off building a bot and doing it online. Have a bot that does it for you.
Can you do that online? I didn't know that.
I don't know. I haven't scouted in years, but there used to be some online live games that had side bets. So.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's I'll have to pick your brain more later.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's it for today. Again, I want to thank you. And that's it. So I'm not Bob Dancer, so I'm not going to go tell everybody to hit lots of royal flushes. Have a good day, everybody.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rich.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it. I want to thank Elihu Feustel for being my guest today and remind you the book we were talking about is called Beyond the Odds, Efficient Market Theory and Tools of Warfare for the Modern Sports Bettor. And his other book, If you haven't read it, I also would recommend that. It is called Conquering Risk, Attacking Wall Street and Vegas. So pick those two up. And until next time, I will see you then.